Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real models of shifting power from the few to the many in the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, and politics.
This week, we revisit a show from the archives, What Would a People's Economy Look Like?, featuring Aaron Tanaka of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima Project, a collaborative project he describes as creating the space for people to use their hands of democracy in building a democratic economy. It's all coming up on The Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome.
Donald Trump's cabinet is said to be the wealthiest in U.S. history, with a shared net worth in the region of $13 billion. That's greater than the world's 70 smallest countries combined. The power of the haves to decide our future, and even the world's, couldn't be more obvious, nor could the disparities more clear. Is this a situation that can hold? A Quinnipiac poll taken in early January revealed that only 45% of American voters said that Trump would take the nation in the right direction. 49% said he would take the nation the wrong way. 45% of voters said his election made them feel less safe, while 27% just as safe or more safe. People fear even as they're despondent. In that same poll, just 27% said they thought that the Trump administration would make their financial situation better. The same percentage who said he'd hurt it. 42% of people polled said he'd make no difference. So, people are expecting mostly bad, not good, or nothing to change, even after an election that was ostensibly all about change. So what are we missing? At least one thing we're missing is a clear picture of what change might look like, an alternative, a future that could be different for our families, our communities, our world. Our next guest is someone who thinks about these questions a lot. He's Aaron Tanaka, founder of the Center for Economic Democracy. His current project, Ujima, set to launch in 2017, intends to build a democratic community development ecosystem and local economy in the Boston area, with a mission to invest in local businesses, create jobs, and distribute wealth, especially among communities of color. Aaron, welcome to the program. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Laura. Very happy to be here.
It's hard, isn't it, with so much on the horizon and so much coming down all around us, to focus on the future. I found myself saying this morning, it's hard to focus on the future with so much blood on the screen, you know,
right.
on the window.
Right.
How are you doing it? How are you thinking about the times we're in?
Yeah, it's obviously a very challenging time. You know, for us, we're challenged to think about the defensive measures, really stepping out, supporting the leadership of undocumented people, Muslims, women, LGBT communities. You know, all the people are going to be under attack, and at the same time, not letting the fear and the defensiveness overtake our communities and our movement. A lot of the reasons that Trump was able to win wasn't because he mobilized a huge new group of voters. It was really, particularly in, say, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, we saw, hundreds of thousands of voters who voted for Obama who just didn't come out for Hillary, right? And so the question for us is, you could have the trajectory or goal of sort of trying to speak to this sort of white working class sort of populist community, which is, I think, important for us to be thinking about. But I think there's a danger in moving too far in that direction and forgetting the folks who were able to put President Obama in office in the first place.
Yeah, people have pointed out over and over again on this show, certainly since the election, that the Electoral College winner-take-all map that is all red, mostly, is very misleading, especially when you think of all the people whose votes weren't counted.
That's right.
And the popular vote, of course, that left Hillary Clinton with a clear majority.
Right. And not to mention just the 40% of people who didn't vote, period, right? And we've always known about this. But our question is really, how do we speak to those folks, the folks who are so disaffected, who don't feel like politics is for them at all? And for us, we think a need for a bolder, more visionary strategy is what's going to really mobilize and animate people who have been so far left out of the system.
So let's talk a bit about your trajectory, because I think it's reflective. tell us a bit how you went from, the bits that I know of your story include growing up on the West Coast, going to Harvard, becoming an intern with a reading program in prison, getting involved in the Ban the Box campaign, helping Massachusetts become, I think, the second state to ban the box on employment forms, whether or not you've been incarcerated. Then gradually moving into this economic empowerment work, first as an organizer of co-ops and then a funder of co-ops.
Right.
Do I have it more or less right?
Yeah, that was pretty good. Thank you. Oftentimes people ask me for the trajectory, and it is, I've been very lucky to kind of follow what I see as sort of a deeper and deeper root cause. And so, I grew up in California and went to a very urban public school, very underfunded, but was very lucky to get into Harvard and felt, from really the first day, the sort of extreme privilege that I had been granted, and knew at the same time the ways in which my classmates were struggling just to survive. And so for me, my first year, I started tutoring at a juvenile detention center because I was familiar with the school-to-prison pipeline. I saw some of it play out in front of me. And now as a growing adult, I wanted to do something about it. And at the same time, I felt like we weren't going to be able to tutor our way out of the prison industrial complex. And so for me, that's what led me to starting to do prison reform organizing and really started working with formerly incarcerated people and family members with loved ones inside. And we were working actually on the issue of solitary confinement. So that was really the first community organizing campaign. And that really brought me into understanding, I started asking, why do we have this system, solitary confinement, which is, in my opinion, really one of the embarrassments of modern American civilization, the ways in which we cage people for 23 hours a day for months and years, if not decades at a time. And then I started asking the question, well, why do we have the prison system in the way that we do in itself? And that's really the place that I was able to do this work was the Boston Workers Alliance, which is the first organization that I helped start and got to run for almost 8 years. And there we started working around the issue of, or working with people who were formerly incarcerated or who had criminal records but couldn't find work, who were unemployed, chronically jobless, or underemployed, and started organizing people around that issue. And so for me, if we really wanted to end the prison system, it began to be clear that we needed to deal with the economic system underlying. And so that's...
We've had Peter Linebaugh on the show with the history of the beginnings of industrial capitalism and the role that incarceration and the police actually played in shepherding people, really coercing people out of a more agrarian lifestyle into the fairly isolated industrial one.
This is the Laura Flanders Show, the radio and TV program that seeks to raise radical spirits. You're listening to a show that aired earlier this year featuring Aaron Tanaka, founder of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima Project, that kicked off this year, exploring and working toward building a people's economy that empowers businesses rooted in community-based social justice movements. More to come. This is What America Looks Like by Tenderflex, featuring Dynasty Electric, Ayler Young, and Jay Rodriguez. Enjoying this podcast? Want to recommend it to others? We do not have a huge PR budget. We rely on you to spread the word. For starters, please take a minute to write a review in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps greatly. For more information on this show, you can go to lauraflanders.com. Now, back to Laura Flanders with her guest, Aaron Tanaka, founder of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima Project, a project on a mission to build a democratic community development ecosystem, putting the local back in economy.
Ujima, what is it? Why now? And what's been the reaction so far?
So the Ujima Project then, which is a project of the Center for Economic Democracy, but really a really collaborative project that includes dozens of amazing organizations. The question became, how do we combine a community organizing strategy with sort of a business and finance strategy? So maybe first I would just say at a political level, I think that in cities and progressive places, we do have quite a bit of power compared to some of the broader red that we see across the country. And so the question is, how do we really build the governance power of our own communities to really take the power where we have it, right? And I think a key piece of that has been really aligning the private sector, the small business community, or even the co-ops that are in our community with the grassroots community, political organizing, the labor sector, for example. And we've seen, unfortunately, that these two sectors, even though they're very aligned in their intentions, don't really talk much to each other. So we have Fight for 15 that's doing amazing work holding the big multinationals accountable.
Around the minimum wage.
Right. But we don't necessarily do much to support the small businesses in our own community who are struggling but want to pay $15 an hour, for example, right?
Well, you're getting to a really important point, and we will hear about Ujima in just a second. But it speaks to where we are right now also, because I don't know about the conversations that you've been in since the election of 2016. Right. I've been in many where exactly that divide is crystal clear. A lot of community organizations and activist groups talking about fight back, sanctuary, resistance, opposition, and very little conversation with, well, how do we actually meet the needs that are coming up, needs to employ one another, feed one another, have housing we can rely on in these delicate times. Now, I'm usually the person in the room that says, wait a minute, this gives us a chance to do all these things the way we want to do them anyway, respond to immediate needs in the way we want to do them in the future, do them differently, create the institutions that we want in our world going forward. But I'm usually the lone voice, and it's hard to make that stick.
Right. Well, I think part of it is, getting people to see the ways in which their interests are tangibly and truly aligned. There has been a way in which the right wing has been able to co-opt sort of the private sector, that if you're pro-business, then you're conservative, right? But we know that the ways in which right-wing and really Democrat Party policies also play out is not in favor of small businesses, that they're giving massive tax breaks and subsidies to multinational corporations that are pushing the race to the bottom of economy that hurts small businesses, right? And so our question is, how do we actually, beyond sort of the political alignment, which we need to do in the longer term, but helping people see the ways in which they can support each other. And we do think that if we want people to fight for something big, that we need to help people see what that could look like, and so...
And Ujima's kind of doing just that.
Yeah, and we're trying to be very big about it also.
So what happened last summer?
The Ujima Project, first, Ujima is one of the Kwanzaa principles and stands for collective work and responsibility. And so we sort of held this value of solidarity as a guiding principle for the work we're doing. And Ujima was started by a collaboration of grassroots community organizations like City Life, Vida Urbana, Boston NAACP, who are amazing, have deep relationships in Boston's low-income communities of color. And then we have investors like Boston Impact Initiative, and we have supporters from the foundation community like the Access Strategies Fund and Solidago Foundation in Massachusetts. So we have these different stakeholders, and we have small businesses like Cero, Haley House, which is an amazing social enterprise that supports ex-prisoners, for example.
And so we were all in a room.
Right, so we all came together and we said, what can we do leveraging our collective power, right? And thinking of power not only as the political power we hold, but also as the investment capital that we collectively wield, as well as the consumption power that we also hold. And so the first step for us has been working to put together an investment fund. And we actually piloted this idea in August as a small demonstration of what a long-term multi-stakeholder investment vehicle could look like. In August, we had about 175 people who put together $20,000 with a couple of matching investors, and really started raising the question of what would it look like for us to democratically decide how to invest our capital. So whether or not you put in $50 or $5,000, we actually have an equal vote in deciding who we want to lend to, the kinds of priorities that are going to be for a fund, the expectations in terms of the ecological, labor, social practices of the businesses also that we want to see. And so we actually had a day, we called it the Solidarity Summit, and we had about 200 people who came together, and we had 5 Black and immigrant-owned companies. Some of them, for example, one is a Black-owned bike shop that wants to convert into a worker-owned co-op. And they actually pitched to the community. They shared what their vision for their business was, how they were benefiting the actual neighborhood, their goals for the future, and then the residents and the investors had the chance to actually talk to them directly, ask questions, and then at the end we voted. And so it was an example of taking this idea of participatory budgeting, which is something that's been fairly popular or growing in popularity around the allocation of tax dollars, city government money, and taking that idea that everyone should have collective and equal control over capital and bringing it into the investment space.
So is this unique to Boston, or could this happen anywhere?
I mean, we think that there's already many experiments in which people are pulling community capital and driving them to sort of build the future that they want. So we think that our contribution is this idea that no matter how much money you put in, everyone should have an equal vote. That's really a theoretical and political commitment that certainly any other community can do. And part of our goal is to actually build this sort of demonstration project so that we can share and replicate this model. And so I should say a little bit more about the project itself, because not only are we really working to set or organize our investment capital, but we're asking the question, well, if we're going to invest in a bunch of businesses, how else can we support them? Because we know we want to invest in mom and pop shops, but they're competing against Walmart, for example. So how do we make sure that our own investments are going to be viable? And so the ways in which we're thinking about this, a key way is organizing our consumer capital, and we're actually exploring the creation of a alternative local currency, something that I'm sure that you've talked about, quite a bit in the past.
So a real integrated approach,
right.
A kind of participatory urban development
right.
project. There's so much more that I'd love you to talk about. We can get more information to our viewers and listeners through our website. How do you assess the energy for this in these times? Has the energy for Ujima flagged as people are so worried about the Trump administration and what might be coming down economically?
I think it's hard to say, because I do think there's a real need for shifting some of our general capacities and movement to be responsive. But I am feeling at this moment that people are more hungry than ever for meaningful and true alternatives. And so, as we see the ways in which the Democratic Party has become stale and less relevant for people, there is this real hunger for not only learning about alternatives, but actually participating, getting their hands dirty. We love the saying that the heart learns what the hands do. And in our case, we're really creating a space for people to use their hands of democracy.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. You're listening to a show that aired earlier this year from our archives, featuring Aaron Tanaka, founder of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima Project, a project building an economy for the people and by the people.
When the real hits the fan, son, who you gonna call? Not Ron Paul, more like the honorable Rhythm Martinez with a team of superheroes. Walk throughout the land for my team of super zeros. Add it up, come back with negative indictments of a system that's stomped out. Positive enlightenment. Occupy the streets as occupy the nation, but don't occupy your mind with false occupations. Occupy the positions when your team falls short. Stand with the accused by occupying the court. Occupy all airways and spaces in between. Occupy the undercover and the overseen. But when occupying ain't enough, and we need a next tactic. Combine the global block math and see what happens. We do it for the people, we do it for the movement. Occupy America, that's what we doing.
Occupation, that's what they all yelling, but it's gangsta nation. Now bankers that be selling our future while the politicians sit back thinking about the next move to scrape the next millions off the backs of our children. Yeah, I'm on for telling the story so crude that it's never selling. No more lies, occupying time in the minds of my sisters while we strive to survive and realize the lives and pictures of our future. Lights are dimmer underneath the shadow they casting, leaving us without dinner. While we all gotta be strapped against the wall with no relief in sight. That's why we stressing to bore you. We bring heat tonight. You'll hear the call, and my suggestion is you heed the call. Occupy government, ain't no either or. We are the ones we've been waiting for. I'm free, not defined by what I have, but what I give to my community and humanity. I'm free. I know my identity, and I really don't care what you think of me. I'm free, living my dreams, but with no fears of impossibilities, cause I know they ain't there. I'm free and already occupying the streets. This way, nothing never could be taken from me. Yeah.
That's Occupation Freedom by George Martinez and the Global Block Collective off the Occupy This album collection. This is the Laura Flanders Show, forward-thinking media for forward-thinking people. Be sure to catch our TV program where you can watch a feature video from the Ujima project and download this very podcast. Go to lauraflanders.com and please take the time to write a review and rate this podcast in iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. You're listening to a show from our archives that aired earlier this year featuring Aaron Tanaka, founder of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima Project. The Ujima Project is getting at the root of the economy through the heart of the community, organizing neighbors, workers, business owners, and investors to create a new community-controlled economy in Greater Boston. Can democracy prevail over capitalism?
Let's come back to where we began, and that is the question of elections and democracy. The fact that half of our population don't participate really raises the question, what is our government about? And I think a lot of people are drawing a conclusion, it's not about me. Mm-hmm. It's about divvying up some spoils between people in power.
Right.
On the other hand, this last election, we did see 13 million votes cast for a candidate calling himself a democratic socialist. Whatever you think of how Bernie Sanders articulated what socialism is, that speaks to a hunger out there.
Yes.
Where do we go with that?
Yeah, I appreciate sort of that being held front and center because there's so much gloom and doom after the election and the synopsis. But, for me, we really started the Center for Economic Democracy because we felt like there was a need and an opportunity to articulate sort of a vision that's beyond capitalism and state socialism. And, I was incredibly surprised that Bernie, who's someone who I've been following for many years, was able to generate the amount of enthusiasm. But it doesn't necessarily surprise me. We've seen the polling, for example, change around millennials. And I'm a class of 2000 from high school, so I'm the sort of beginning of the millennial generation, and have seen the shifts in attitudes around capitalism, for example. That's now young people prefer socialism without necessarily even knowing what it means over capitalism. And we've seen, of course, the Occupy moment, the Piketty book that was so popular, and we've seen, for example, the Movement for Black Lives, their policy platform, that draws amazing economic vision that I would argue is really a post-capitalist vision. And so I think, in the movement spaces, there's a huge hunger for it. And then I think, more broadly, that the American populace, people who aren't necessarily political, have a deep gut sense that something is not right. And I think the issue is that neither of the candidates were really speaking real solutions to that fundamental brokenness of not only our economy, but really our society and culture in some ways.
Well, they weren't speaking to it. Who is? I mean, you talked about two options: capitalism,
right.
Leave it to the capitalists; state socialism, let the state decide.
That's right.
What's the third?
Right. So, this is a question that I love engaging people around. So we talk about the failures of state socialism. We think of the Soviet Union, and there were central planners, and their job was to tell people, we want to first say how much sugar, how much flour we want, and forcing people to work to meet this state budget, essentially. And what we saw was, one, a mismatch of goods and services, so there wasn't enough choice for people. But we also saw the ways in which it was authoritarian system, the ways in which central planning tends to concentrate political power and has led to really bad outcomes for communities. So we know we don't want that.
So that third?
But the question is, how could we think about the democratic planning of our economy, this idea that planning can still be useful? And in fact, even in capitalist economies, the public sector is a planned economy. The question is, are they accountable to everyday people? Right?
Who's at the table?
That's right. And so our conception of economic democracy is really the idea that a much larger portion of our economy should be planned, but it should be done through a democratic process, that communities actually can decide what their priorities for investment should be, what the basic rights really, what sort of the standard of living for people ought to be, and that we should orient our economy to meet those before we sort of spend our land, labor, and capital on producing and consuming unnecessary luxuries, for example, right? And so, I think of it sometimes about the ways in which you budget for a family. If we really saw our country as people that we care about, you would make sure that everyone has food and, for example, clothes before you spend money on piano lessons, for example, for one of the kids, even if that's something that's important for you. And we want to sort of create a political system in which people have the ability to prioritize what the core standard of living for people should be, and then to orient our resources to meet those needs.
I hear putting the social back in socialism.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
Is that work we could do in these times when there are so many emergencies people are facing? Because it's very long-term and it's very deep.
That's right. I mean, I do believe that the ways in which we are building the alternatives, the models that you're highlighting on this show, right, are starting to build the building blocks for this future. And so if we think about economic democracy as a struggle to have democracy prevail over capitalism, right, this sort of historical tension that's been part of our country, how do community land trusts, which are democratically controlled land, worker co-ops that control labor democratically, things like the Ujima project that are doing democratic control of capital, right? These are all building blocks for a future economic democracy. The question is, how do we help people grow these and scale these and then see the ways in which they're connected to each other to become an actual ecosystem, a true alternative economy?
That's Aaron Tanaka of the Center for Economic Democracy and the Ujima project.
For more information on Aaron Tanaka, the Center for Economic Democracy, the Ujima Project, and more, along with our full archives, including Laura's weekly commentary, The F Word, go to lauraflanders.com. That's where you can download a copy of this show and subscribe to our podcast for free. And please take the time to write a review or rate this podcast in iTunes or wherever you've subscribed to this podcast. It helps spread the word.
The show's produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, and supervising producer Anna Barsan. Our team that pulls it all together includes Monica Mohapatra, Natasha Elena Ullman, Jeannie Hopper, Danica D'Souza, Emily Allen, Charlotte Prager, and Diego Romero Montiel. Write to me. I enjoy hearing from you. That's Laura, Laura, at lauraflanders.com. Tell me what you think. I do my best to respond. The Laura Flanders Show is made possible by the Novo Foundation and listeners like you. So become a member today. Thank you for your time and your ongoing support. We could not do it without you. Stay kind. Stay curious. Till the next time, I'm Laura Flanders.